Hello, everyone. I'm Geni Whitehouse, here to talk with you about creating a new roadmap for your business. Let's get started. So, when we talk about a new roadmap for your business, what we're talking about really is leadership. And when we're in times of uncertainty and rapid change and, a whole set of new rules that we're trying to comply with, what really matters is leadership. We're trying to achieve business results in the midst of a little bit of chaos. And so what we need to be is certain about what it is we're doing, why we're doing it, and how to lead teams so that they are engaged and follow us. And one of the things that we have to do, I think, that's critically important for us is to step back and remember why it is that we started this business, because that's going to be the core guiding light that keeps you and your teams moving forward in a positive direction. So I'm going to walk you through some of the things that you can do in order to re-engage yourself, to re-inspire yourself, and then to apply that inspiration to your teams. So I'm a CPA. I work in Napa Valley with a CPA firm focused on wineries part of the time. And then I also have a remote bookkeeping business built around QuickBooks Online that I started with a partner. And I'm also a speaker and writer and educator out in the world to really try to break down barriers to understanding financial concepts. What I hear, and I've been a CPA since the 80s. I started out with Deloitte and then did tax and did a bunch of different things before finding my way into high tech and then back to consulting with wineries here in Napa. So, the number one question that we get from owners is, why don't my teams, my staff, my employees, whatever you want to call them, make decisions the same way that I would? They always want to say, why can't they be entrepreneurial like I am? Why can't they decide things the way that I would? You take a moment when somebody asks you that question and you immediately say back to that owner, well, do they have the same information that you do? Have you educated them on how you arrive at the decisions that you reach? And most of the time the owner will go, I guess not. Maybe I should start sharing more information with those teams. And, that's kind of the point. If we want people to follow your lead and decide things the way that you would, especially now when we have distributed teams, all of our people are back in their homes in most cases, working with clients and customers and having to make decisions without you standing there or without you, in the next room over or something. So it's more important than ever that they are fully and completely engaged with you and agree with the direction that you would take, and that they are empowered to make decisions the way that you would like them to make decisions. But that's going to require some commitment and effort on your part. So if we want to drive those teams forward, we have to engage with them both at the level of their heart, and that's touchy-feely, but it's the emotional commitment we need from them to really bring their best selves to work. We need their minds to be engaged and active, and we need them to use their hands to make things happen for our business. And so we're going to talk about how we go about doing that as leaders in an environment like the world in which we find ourselves. So the first place we're going to start is with the heart. I need an emotional connection to those teams. I need a connection between them and the customers that they're dealing with, between them and the work that they do. And if I don't get that, I'm not going to have a fully engaged member of my team, and they're not going to deliver services or provide products in the way that I would want them to. And so it's up to us to change their connection to our business. And so, this is one of the quotes that to me appeals to what we're going through right now. And this author is a Brazilian author who's written a number of inspirational sort of thought-provoking novels and stories. And one of them is The Alchemist. There are a bunch of other books. He seems to produce a new book about every other week. But this is a quote that I think applies to our time. We drown not by falling into the river, but by staying submerged in it. If we can just float to the top of some of this and ride that river, maybe it will carry us in a better direction eventually. But right now we just hit this water and we don't know what to do. And so we're trying to survive some of the panic that we might feel at the beginning. And this happens to us as owners. We know there was this immediate cliff that we sort of jumped off into the unknown. And then we were responsible not only for ourselves, but for all of these other people who jumped in with us sort of at the same time. And so it's difficult. So really, it's like here's the dark river that's there. And our goal is to get our teams and ourselves safely to the other side where business success might happen. But right now, our teams are standing here sort of bewildered, frightened, and scared on the other side of the bank, And we're asking them either to jump in and just go for it, or to try to swim to the other side. And we haven't given them really a life raft. And yet we expect them to make this journey with us. So it is our job as leaders to make them feel safe in plunging into the unknown along with us. And so our leadership role as leaders in normal times, whatever normal is, it's our job to instill confidence in our teams, to make them feel safe, to offer them a secure environment in which to work, to offer them direction and guidance, and to hopefully inspire those folks so that we can get them to come out from under that blanket where they're cowering in fear and actually step forth into the world and do great things for us, for our clients, or our customers. But, we still have to be human. We have to tap into our own humanness and show that we have empathy, that we can motivate and empower those people, and that we can continue to educate them. The people who are suffering the most right now are the people who don't have jobs, who don't know what the future holds for them, who don't wake up with a purpose day to day, and don't have a sense of why they matter and what they want. And, by giving people jobs, we're actually helping them avoid that situation. We're giving them a reason to be, a reason to wake up, something to accomplish. And so the more we can empower them to embrace that and do that, the more successful we're going to be as a company, but also as humans, the more empowered we're going to make people feel in our world. But I encourage you at this point to not try to micromanage people, because that is a demotivating way to approach leadership. So we want to give them high level direction without dictating every single detail of what we want them to do during our day. And I know it's difficult when we can't see them sitting at their desks all day long and we don't know what they're doing, but there are ways for us to monitor, measure, motivate, and drive behaviors forward that doesn't require us to be micromanagers and actually shut down the creative energy that we need our teams to apply to the work that they do. Now is the time for us as leaders to really return to the basics. We have to think about whatever reason it was that inspired us to start our business in the first place, and then we need to share that. We need to make that emotional commitment, that heart-centric thing that drove us to put up with the pain and suffering of driving forward in whatever business we built, and let our employees really tap into that emotional investment. And that's when we're going to start getting people who are excited about doing the work that we're asking them to do. So the why comes originally from Simon Sinek, who did a TEDx talk and also wrote a book called Start With Why. It's been around for a while, but I'm still amazed that so many organizations have not defined that why or articulated it clearly for their employees. And for us, for my CPA firm, the why is one of the guiding aspects of our business. It helps us decide who we hire and what we do when it comes to providing services at no charge for our customers and clients. And so it's a critical gauge for everything that we decide in terms of how we operate our own business. And it's one of the things that we teach our clients, and these are mostly wineries, as I said before. We help them articulate it so that it's a guiding principle for their teams as well. So if I want them to make decisions the way I would as a leader, then they need to understand my why so that they can then align with that when it comes to a decision. So if a customer asks them to do something and they don't know what the right answer is, they can go to that why statement and line up with that and then make a decision that hopefully falls in line with the way you as a leader might make the same decision. So that why is that guiding principle, that stake that you put in the ground that everybody can refer back to if they ever come up with a question that they can't answer. And even if you've already defined your why for a pre-COVID world, you might want to revisit that and see if you've had to pivot what mattered in your business or your direction, and see if your why needs to be modified based on what you're doing now in a different environment than the one in which you created it before. So either way, check in to see what is still holding true that you haven't lost in that river that you jumped into. Get your teams online if you have a why or if you're thinking about creating one, and have them share stories, these stories of when they felt the most proud to be part of your organization. It's one of the things about my experience during COVID and being involved in the CPA firm that I work for that's really given me a really positive connection to my firm. How leaders behave in a crisis really gives you insight into what matters to them. And our firm stepped up and did some things that I was very proud of. We offered just free information. We were out there publishing content by the minute and helping our winery clients try to make sense of some of the federal regulations that were coming out, even though we didn't have all the answers. So my firm, I was the person writing all this content, and they empowered me to do whatever I could at no charge to anybody just to get information out in the hands of people who needed it. And those are the kind of things that really test leadership and test your why. Our why says we want to elevate the wine industry. And if that's what we really believe, then now is the time for us to really live that as a firm. And fortunately, leadership embraced that fully. Even though, we're trying to figure out, all of our clients are impacted by this, what it's going to do for us as a firm and for our own teams. But they made the decision that now is the time for us to really live the why in a big way. And so that's what we do. And so that's what I encourage you to do as well. So this idea that you have your team share their stories, their COVID stories that become part of your vernacular, they become part of your history as an organization, and capture those stories and then celebrate the things that you were able to do that line up with that why. This comes from a book called Find Your Why that was written by Simon Sinek, again, the author of the original book, along with some members of his team. And it really helps you figure out how to define that why by gathering your teams and asking different questions. So if you're struggling to really clarify what that is, I encourage you to go check out that book. The Start With Why book, the original whole concept is relatively simple concept, a little harder to turn into a real story that captures the emotional aspect of what it is you're trying to do in the world by forming this business. And the answer, by the way, to why did you start this business is never to make a profit. That is an ancillary benefit, hopefully, of some passion that drives you to do this. So make those stories from COVID part of that hero's journey. They're part of that battle story that tends to unite and gel the teams that you bring together and that survive an experience like this. So hearts are first. We need the emotional connection. We need the commitment there. We need to capture the stories. We need to make sure that the team members that we have on board are aligned around the values that we think are important, that are part of that why. So now is a time, I think of COVID as a pressure cooker. We've put everybody in a sort of high pressure situation. And what happens during a high pressure environment or experience like this is that the heroes rise to the top and the duds sort of drop to the bottom. So we can really separate the people who are flexible, who are committed, who care, who really step up in a crisis, and the people who totally fail during a crisis, people who are set in their ways, who are rigid, who are unhappy, who are grumpy, who aren't caring enough to work through what happens, who won't do whatever's needed to succeed. Those are the people who sort of drop to the bottom, and we're seeing people sort of weed out the wheat from the chaff, as it were, as a result of what's happening in COVID. It is also a time, by the way, that we not only vet the successful team members, but we also see the tools that are supporting us and working for us. We see the vendors and suppliers that step up. We see the relationships that work and those that don't. It becomes very clear to us what we need to stop doing and what we need to do more of as we go forward. So, there's a real opportunity in the midst of this sort of pressure cooker environment to really look closely at what aspects of your entire business environment are working for you and what things you need to get rid of and look for a better solution in the long term. So we have that emotional commitment. We've got the hearts engaged. And then those who we can't get emotionally connected, this might be the time for you to send them on their way. Maybe you don't have the right people on your team, that you've suffered with people who were, low contributors, and now you don't have the patience to do it because you can't afford to have anybody on your team that's not a maximum contributor. And then the why becomes, again, that guiding light for who you hire and who you don't hire, and then how you treat people should be in support of what you say matters for you as an owner. So when we go to the mind engagement, we have to shift from just defining that why. So the why sets the high level goal for the organization in total. The why gives us that emotional starting point. And then we have to take that why and then we have to leverage it into what we do and how we do it. And it's part of the golden ratio that Simon Sinek talks about. But the why is where the leader defines what we're doing. The why comes from that leadership intention about what he was trying to do for building a business. Now, the leader creates it. And then what you do, if you're a wise leader, is you say, here's what I think this business is about. And then you get your teams to come back and check in and say, give me some examples of how we live this why. Because I don't want it to be a plaque on the wall. And there's nothing worse than having a vision and a mission statement that you put on your wall. And it says, we value people more than anything. And then that's on the wall. And then the company goes through and fires everybody on the staff or lays everybody off, the first sign of any kind of a cash crunch. So, we value people more than anything, and then layoffs. When the vision, the mission, the why is a completely disconnected concept from what we demonstrate in real life, you've got a big problem. So we want to have a why statement. The leader says, this is why I did this. And then you want to ask the teams, how does this transition from concept to action? So tell me examples of where you see this why coming to life in your day-to-day work. And that's where you make sure that they're really connected to this, that it's not just a pie in the sky, great big idea that doesn't mean anything to anybody. And then you have them weigh in on what we do that supports that why, and then talk about how we go about doing it. So the process involves the why first, and then the what, and then the how. And so the why is, the critical component that's going to help us construct a raft that will take us all across that river we're trying to cross. So if we do the why as leaders, but if we go about telling people what to do and how they should be doing it, as I said before, that's demoralizing. That's taking power away. So what we want to do is agree on the what and what works and what doesn't, and then set an intention, a clear vision about what it is we're trying to accomplish across different areas of the business. And you'll see that I built the grid, rows, and columns, and to me that kind of looks like a paper raft that we're building for us to get carried across that river. So we want our teams to align around the why and be educated enough so they can understand what we're trying to do, and again, how they can support us in getting things accomplished. So I'm going to share a tool with you. And I told you that I work in a wine industry focused CPA firm, and we are trained as a firm in an advisory methodology from a company called Mentor Plus. So they taught me, and I ran into this company back in the 2000s, and I've been speaking about it, and I've been implementing these tools with wineries since about 2007. And this tool is part of the methodology that we were trained in, and I'm using it by permission from the Mentor Plus organization. And it's really pretty simple. It's a SWOT analysis, but there are aspects of this that to me are very different from the traditional SWOT analysis. And the first thing is this bottom right-hand corner, the why. We have this why question that we have to answer that's going to dictate everything else that we decide for this organization. So we have to answer that first. That's, again, the heart and soul of what we're trying to accomplish as a business. And then we look across, and this is scope, and the dollar sign is the S in scope for financial, and then customers, operations, people, and end in mind. So this is scope methodology. And we look across the 5 areas of the business in order to really drive a complete result that is in support of this why. So I look at the financial aspects, the customer aspects, the operational aspects, the people, and then the end in mind, which is really, what are we trying to do with this business? So, for example, when I ask people, this has to do with both exit strategy and end in mind and the why. They all kind of come together here in this bottom corner. But if I'm trying to grow a business to sell it, I have a very different set of requirements from someone who is trying to grow a business to leave as a legacy. They're trying to pass it on to the next generations. So very different aspect of everything that we do in that business based on what this end in mind for this business is defined to be. And so sometimes the end in mind might be sell the business, and you may not want that to be something that you tell everybody, because I have a short-term focus. I want to sell this thing in 5 years or whatever. And you may or may not want that to be clear to everybody, but you also have to articulate the emotional why. In the wine industry, it's usually, we value the nature of the land that we are privileged to work on. We want to share the fruits of our labor with our friends and family. We think hospitality is important and valuable. And so we want to contribute to celebrations by producing great wine that can be shared for great occasions. I mean, something like that. That's not very articulate, but I mean, that's the idea. There's usually a connection to the earth. There's some experience somebody had in their life early on where they had an amazing glass of wine that was part of an experience that was memorable. And so those people come back 20 years later and want to have a winery and want to share those experiences with other folks. And so there's a very emotional connection to coming and doing a winery. And there's a similar connection to just about everybody who's ever started a business. at least when they started. Now, sometimes they might lose sight of that, but we want to capture that story. That's the motivational aspect of what we want to put together for our team. So we define that. We also think about our exit strategy. So why we exist, and then what we're trying to do with this business in terms of where we're trying to take it for sale, for legacy, for just a lifestyle business, whatever it is, we want to define that in some sense, at least for ourselves. And then we can decide what of that gets shared with our teams. But then once we define that, then we want to go and think about our alignment with our end in mind. So if I'm trying to build a family legacy, then I'm going to think about, well, have I done a good job about getting family members involved in the business? And if I haven't, then that's something that I'm going to put down here in the could do better row. So I'm going to look at what works across each of these areas of the business, what's not working, and then we're going to define the ideal outcome across each of these areas of my business. And this is where we're going to engage our teams, and then we're going to have a platform for launching everything else that we do going forward. So this end in mind component, depending on what you're trying to do, see if you're doing things that align with that or not, and then fill in this little grid with what works and what doesn't work. Okay, then we want to look across these areas of the business at ideally what we want to see for each of these areas. We want to see the financial goal. What are we trying to accomplish? What do we want this thing to look like that supports our why from a financial aspect? So I want to have positive operating cash flow. Do I want to have consistent revenue growth year after year? Do I want to grow long-term equity? What kind of financial goal do I want to establish for the business? And then how can I capture that for the team? So we're going to fill that in as our ideal outcome on the financial side. We're going to do the same thing for customers, operations, and people. Now, we use this in multiple ways, this simple tool in multiple ways. We do it in team meetings. So if in a pre-COVID environment, we decide what we want to focus on and what we're going to do. And this becomes an aspect of the budget and planning process. We define the why, we reiterate this is why we do this. These are the things we're trying to accomplish. Here's what we want to see ideally across these areas of the business. And then we have everybody complete their own sheet about what they think as a business we do well from a financial side, from the customer side, from the operations people. End in mind is kind of the owner's domain here. This is where you kind of fill in your stuff. But the rest of this, have those team members say, what would they think is an ideal outcome for the financial part of the business, for the customer side of the business, for the operations of people. And then you can come together and compile everybody's perspectives and then check them against each other. And again, check back against this why. So you see how this why is such a critical aspect of everything else that you do. And in fact, for me, if I have a client come in and ask me for any kind of typical accounting service, and our firm does this, we use this document in all of our prospective customer, we call them customers in our world meetings, to sort of set the stage for what our client or prospective client might need from us. And so we'll say, okay, you need a budget. And what am I budgeting for? What kind of business? Why are we doing this business? Why are we a winery? Why aren't we a shoe store? If you wanted to make a profit, you would do anything but start a winery, because it's very hard and very long capital intensive process to get to profit and positive cash flow in this industry. So there's got to be something else that makes you want to be in this industry. So we start with that conversation. We fill out this grid. We interview them by using this grid and write in information. And then we know better what it is they need and where we can best work with them to do it. So if I'm trying to do a budget and I don't know what matters to you, if I don't know why you're doing what you're doing, then I would tell you to fire all the marketing people, right? Or fire, or get the cheapest labor that you can, or cut costs at every possible avenue in the business. That's an accountant's view on everything, right? But if you tell me you want to create a luxury experience for everybody who comes to your winery, and I'm telling you to cut costs, we're not in alignment. So I got to know what you want before I can assist you in measuring things and lining your team and doing all of that. So this is a critical aspect of everything that we do when we're working with clients. And it's something you can do for yourself inside your own business. Walk through this, get your team in agreement, have them complete this for your business. And you might want to do this same document in a pre-COVID way, complete it before COVID, and then complete it again and say, what changed based on the COVID environment? What worked during COVID and what didn't work during COVID? And then what might we shift as a result? Because again, things are going to float to the top that were really amazing and great. And the bad stuff is going to become very, very visible and apparent to everybody on the team. This is a time where, anybody who's on desktop applications, they're going to see the limitations of that. Everybody who's on QuickBooks Online is going to be celebrating the fact that we have that on the cloud and we can all access the information without any effort on other people's parts. So, these cloud environments are becoming, there's a lot less hesitation than there used to be. Any last vestiges of resistance to moving to the cloud are, I think, very quickly evaporating. So here's how the process works again. We need to set the why at the leadership level. We need to determine the what with the team involved. And then the how part of this, how we do whatever it is we're trying to do, has to go down a level to not just the team and the leaders on the teams, but the people at the front line. So again, in my world, I have a retail aspect of the winery, the tasting room, where you're actually selling wine directly to consumers, direct to consumer channel. And so those people at the bar pouring the wine for you to taste are the people I need to get engaged in how we're going to do what it is we're trying to accomplish. So I want their input. I don't want to just keep this in the ivory tower and eliminate the people who are in the best position to know what's happening. This is one of the concepts that comes out of the Kaizen approach, the Japanese production processes that I know heard about. And one of the revolutionary things that they did is go to the lowest level of work, the contact with the final result, and ask those people for their perspective. Don't go to the MBAs in the back room who are doing the analytics. Get to the people at the front lines and ask them, how can we take a minute out of this process? Or how can we make the customer experience better when it comes to the shopping cart or whatever it is? Those are the people with the answers, not the people sitting back in the office with the spreadsheets. We have different answers to other questions. So now we have a little bit of a roadmap. We've gotten this sort of grid. We've got people to understand how the pieces kind of come together. So now we're ready to do the fun part, right? Pass out the financial statements to the teams and tell them to go make more money. That going to work for you? If you pass out financial statements to the people in your organization, and I'm talking about not just the line workers, but I'm talking about leaders. You get your directors around the table, your leadership table, get them at the table, and you pass out financial statements and ask them to do something about them. They're not going to have the foggiest idea how those financial statements impact what they do day to day. They're going to know that the number's good or bad. They're going to look at the bottom line on the profit and loss statement, just like you do. They're going to know it's not good, but they're not going to have the foggiest idea what to do about improving it. They're not going to understand anything else on that document. If you show them a balance sheet, they're going to have even less of a clue about what that has to do with anything in real life. For most people, even many business owners and many leaders who have never had training in financial statement information, what we provide as accountants to those people is Greek. And that's what this says in Greek. It is Greek to me. You pass out gobbledygook that they don't understand and expect them to then change their behaviors based on that information. If you want those kind of results, you need to train and educate your teams and what financial information means. So we have a service we deliver for our clients called Financial Fluency. And that's a very specific title. Again, it comes from the training we've had in advisory services. But that is much more powerful than financial literacy. Financial literacy means you can read and write it. Financial fluency means it's embedded in your brain and you can actually apply it to decisions that you make. That's what we want with our teams. They don't need to be bookkeepers, but we need them to understand and think through the implications of different decisions that they make so that they can understand the connection to the financial outcomes of the business. So I have a couple of tools for you. One is a publicly available document that I created on a site called slideshare.net, and the links will be provided to you in the dialogue in the chat area so that you can get that. But slideshare.net is now owned by LinkedIn, so it's connected to the LinkedIn site as well. And I have a little slideshow. You just click through it on your own time. There's no audio, and it just explains financial statements at a very basic level. And I created this like one Saturday night. Yes, I have no life because I was so worried about people not getting this stuff, not understanding just the core financial statements. And so I created it one Saturday night, I put it up there. There are 100,000 downloads of this thing. I mean, it's an apple tree and it's kind of goofy and, accountants do graphics in weird ways. But it addresses a need. 100,000 people have downloaded it. That tells me there are a ton of people out there who don't know how to read a financial statement and don't understand it and are not in a position in a meeting when you sit down with your team of leaders and you say, we need to improve assets. We need to reduce our fixed assets. they're not in a position to raise their hand and go, what's a fixed asset? What's an asset? What's a balance sheet? They're not going to do that. They're supposed to know somehow, magically, over the course of their development in business. Nobody ever sits them down and explains this stuff. So if you want them to relate to the financial results, you got to educate them about what this stuff means. And this is a tool for you. Again, it's free. You can download the slides. You can show it on the SlideShare and just watch it on the cloud. You can send the link to people and let them just run through it, and they don't have to disclose the fact that they don't know it. Just make it available to team. This is another book. Again, this is how accountants do ugly covers for their books. This book cover is like a ledger sheet turned into a cover, but it is the best book I've found to explain core financial concepts in an easy to digest, easily understood way. It's called Managing by the Numbers. It's by Chuck Creamer. It's an old book. It's got a case study. It talks about a business. And the first 4 chapters will get you from zero to understanding, at least conceptually, what financial statements are all about. So I would pass these out to teams. I think this is critical, a base level of understanding for anybody working in business. Make it available, do a book club on it, get your teams trained, because that's the only way they're going to be able to follow you down the financial trajectory that you're expecting them to follow. So that's how we lay the foundation. So when we're training teams, we come in and do that. We either send them these books, and I'm part of I do training, a financial concept training class for winery people who are on the sales side of the business. So I teach financial concepts to non-financial people in wineries. And it's an 8-hour class, and I walk them through it. And we have that book go to everybody in advance of the class. They read it, and then they come in with at least a vocabulary that I can work from. And then we show them how to connect what they do to the financial information. So look for that, train those folks, and then they will be much better advocates for what you're trying to do. So here's a tool that is designed to get leadership in alignment about what we need to focus on from a financial perspective. So this is a product called Fathom. It's a cloud-based application. I'm going to bring it up live here. And you should be seeing that. It's Fathom. It's a one screen out of many. So Fathom is an online cloud application that integrates directly with QuickBooks Online and also QuickBooks Desktop. You can also import financial data from a spreadsheet if you're on a different application. You can also bring in non-financial data and build your own custom KPIs, key performance indicators. But what I like best about this tool is this one screen, and you see there are a list of menu items here. There's a goal seek screen that you access inside the application that allows you to look at your financial goals and then connect those goals with actions that you can take to improve your results. So I can choose any of these different financial metrics that matter to me in my business. And most of my clients are worried about cash flow, especially now. Operating cash flow is a key financial result they want to drive up. And in my example, I have a fake winery here that's got a negative $650,000 in operating cash flow, and their goal is to achieve $125,000 of positive operating cash flow. So what this screen does, and again, there's dashboards, there's metrics, there's KPIs, it's all pulling from your QuickBooks accounting, your QuickBooks Online or desktop, and it's bringing in all the metrics and putting it together in a way that an owner can relate to. So this is a tool for you to see what's really going on, and then to determine what the drivers are of your financial issue that you're trying to address. And so what's fabulous about this from my perspective is the ability to see what you improve and how they impact cash flow. So, our inclination is the first most sensitive metric that we need to focus on is the price of what we're selling, whether that's a service or a product. And it's telling me that that's the most sensitive metric. So it shows me if I move the needle here that I'm increasing the cash flow. And then maybe I want to fire some folks, which, that's what the accountants all want us to do, or cut some costs. Now, from my experience, most of us have cut a lot of the chaff out of our costs already. The fixed expenses are a difficult one to take much more out of, but if we can do a small change here, then we can improve our results. So if you're the leader and you have this connected to your QuickBooks Online, and by the way, if you have QuickBooks Online Advanced, you get this license free as part of your subscription to QuickBooks Online. So you have your own license. You can go in and do this. You can work with your external accountant if you have one who's empowered who understands how to walk you through this scenario. But what you do is bring this up with your team, get your leaders in the room and say, we got to have more operating cash flow because that's where the money comes from to pay you folks. So we all want to agree that this is important. We can fix price. So you get the sales team. You guys in sales, what can we do to raise our average price across all of our sales? And then they're going to have some ideas. And you say, okay, is this something we should focus on? And how much of an increase do you think we can achieve? And let's get a commitment from you guys. Okay, I think I can achieve about a 4.5%, a 2.83% increase in price on average. And then you're going to write that down. So you can print this screen out when you finish. And this is going to be the marching orders for departments in your company. And then they can take these back and try to work on activities that support these goals. This model also shows a weird thing that you might be going, this tells me to reduce the volume of what I'm selling. Now, the way this model works is it assumes that these drivers are going to stay in the same ratio with each other. So what it tells me is, based on my current sales experience and my collection experience for those sales, and my payables related to those sales, and the inventory days it's taken me to sell this much, if I continue to keep all of these ratios in the same relationship, I should be selling less, not more. Because the more I sell with these other aspects of my business, the less cash I'm going to generate. So that's really telling me that I got to fix some stuff down here, that I've got some balance sheet problems that are going to impact my cash flow. And so I can't continue to sell more at the wrong ratios. I need to sell less or fix the ratios that are the core underlying problem. And in this case, a lot of the problem is related to my ability to collect what I sell. And you see how big of an impact I have. Plus, I'm paying faster than I'm getting paid by my customer. So I'm going to pay everybody but my accountant slower. And that's going to keep me more cash flow. And then I've got to get rid of a bunch of this inventory that I'm carrying. And you see how I'm now showing myself as the owner and my teams what the impact can be of changes in some of the behaviors that we've been following. So again, I'm going to have this conversation. I'm going to say, Sally, you're on my team. You're in charge of sales. What can we do on the price side of the equation? And I'm going to bring in my accountants and say, what fixed expenses can we modify? Where can we cut some more cost out of our expense side? And then I'm going to get some of the other folks. I'm going to get the sales team. I'm going to get the credit team to say, what's happening with receivable days? How come it's taking us longer to collect than it should? I'm going to talk to the purchasing agents, go, what can we do to extend some of the payment terms on the vendor side? Can we renegotiate contracts? And then I'm going to go, we got to get rid of some inventory. What are our ideas to do that? So print this out. This is now the marching orders that we've now divided. We're going to assign owners to do these things. And now we've got alignment around the high-level financial goals. And then we're going to ratchet that down to individual actions in our next steps. Okay, so that's Fathom HQ. That's the website. Go check that out. If you don't have Online Advanced, I think the subscription is around $49 a month for a single company. You can invite other people into your model. You can build really cool custom reports. There's a whole bunch of really neat stuff that you can do in this tool. You can also create your own metrics and KPIs, and you can monitor results and success over time. So it's a great investment, a really nice way to convert boring black and white numbers to cool, colorful, interactive graphics that really enlighten people in a way that a printed report, in my opinion, never does. Okay, so now we're done. We've done that. We have alignment of the team, and now we're going to go back to the line workers, right, and say, okay, guys, go sell $1 million of additional revenue. And how's that going to fly? Well, you're going to get, huh? What? What you talking about? You're going to get a dog in the headlights look from your teams. They don't know what to do. You still haven't, you've said we need $1 million of additional revenue maybe, but they don't know what to do next. So what we need to do now is to break down the steps into individual actions and measures. And we need, whatever we measure is going to be managed. So measures and management are infinitely connected. And so if you're going to manage people on something, you need to have measures that are visible and relevant to those people who are doing the work. And that's how we get to the level of hands. So we have the hearts engaged, we've got the minds intellectually, they understand the financial connections, but now we got to turn those understanding into actions. We got to get those hands working on behalf of whatever effort we're trying to accomplish. So that's where we go. Again, we get our teams together. We break down the actions that we're going to focus on into individual steps. So if we were in that goal seek, And we told our teams that we needed them to increase the average price of what we're selling in order to achieve that cash flow objective. Then we need to ask them to tell us, what can we do to make this happen, and get their input on it. So I'm not saying go back to your cubicle and increase average price. I'm saying, okay, this is the goal that's the layer below what we're trying to accomplish to achieve a cash flow increase. So let's all think about the actions we might take individually that influence this average pricing. And so if we think about it, the channels that we're selling to, again, we have in our world wholesale and retail, and we have very different average prices for those different channels. So maybe we need to look at the mix between wholesale and retail, and that would help us elevate our average price. So then you get somebody in this discussion to say, okay, think about what we can measure related to a sales channel change if that's what we need to fix. And then we might look at product or service mix. So I might have some high value products and some lower value products. And maybe we're selling too many of the lower value products, and we need to focus more on those higher value or higher price point products in order to drive the overall average price up. Maybe we need to revisit the package size of what we're selling. This Haagen-Dazs did this a while ago. They kept the same price, but then they made the package smaller. So then the consumer didn't know the price went up, but the price per ounce was effectively increased. So there's an average price increase, which was accomplished by shrinking the size of the product that we're selling. And you'll see that on bottling sizes, on different things where we actually reduce the ounces that are provided, but we keep the sticker price the same. And so we're able to raise our average price per unit. We need to look closely at any discounts that we offer. This is a big challenge in the wine industry. People who are selling in retail might decide to offer discounts for people just to move some more product that day. And we need to look at what our policies are around the discounts that we provide on items that we're selling. And then we might consider offers that we're making, promotional offers where we're bundling different things together. We might look at different ways to raise those effective average prices as well. So these items in gray are the information that we're getting from our teams. They're coming up with these ideas. And again, we're going to be capturing this on a wall in a room with them. We're not making it a tense kind of thing. We're expecting them to suddenly be magicians and produce the answer, but we want them to share their opinions and inputs. So give everybody a Post-it note and say, write down what you think is an impact that might help us increase our average price. And then you capture that on a wall. And then you say, okay, now what do you think? Which one of these things do you think we should focus on, and pick something? Okay, maybe we should come up with some different offers where we bundle things together, so we're not really showing what the individual prices are, and that might allow us to effectively increase the price of something relative to something else. And so if that's the strategy we want to take, then our next step is to go, okay, what should we count that will help us see if we're on track for achieving this additional offer that we provide? So that's the process of setting the high level at the fathom level, and then picking a driver that we want to focus on, and then drilling that driver down into the things that we can do that influence that driver, and then going from that to measurements. And now we've got team engagement, and then they set up what they're going to count, what they're going to monitor and measure, and then where the rewards are going to be applied based on whatever activity is being set by that team. And so we have a model that we use. Again, this came from my training from Mentor Plus. He taught me everything that I know that's good. All the bad stuff came from me. All the good stuff that I know about how to be a consultant in the world came from my training at Mentor Plus. And this is a model. And again, I'm in the wine industry. So this is a sample. Le Coeur Rouge Winery is our case study that we use for all of our CPA firms training. And we took the drivers of revenue and we broke those out for people working in a tasting room. So this is a retail model. We call this, and this is a tool called the Profit Equation Planner. Again, that's a tool that came from Mentor Plus. And so, but this was the first time I understood the drivers, the factors that we can leverage to achieve a revenue result. So there are two main aspects. There's a volume driver and there's a price driver. And then we break that down for our teams into these components. The number of days open. If I'm in a retail facility, that impacts my sale. And then the average number of visitors per day that show up. And these are things that we track in our winery. So then we can look at history, and then we can look at what to change for each of those aspects. And there's a conversion ratio. And then we look at how many cases each customer that buys on it on each time they buy. And then we have a whole series of factors. And then we look at the price, and we look at the mix between the products in this case, because we're only dealing with the retail channel. So one of the big things we can do from a price perspective is sell less of the cheaper wine and more of the more expensive wine, and that will effectively increase our average price. So I'm going to show you the live model now, just so you can get a sense of why this thing is powerful for teams. Because so this is an Excel model, and what happens is I'm talking to the teams and I'm working through different things, and they might say that we don't have enough people coming into the winery, and I say, okay, let's put 5 more people in the winery and see what that does to revenue. And when I do that, the revenue change will show up down below here when I'm able to accomplish an increase in revenue. So I put the 5 more people, I shove them into the building. I got 5 more sitting in the building now, and that hasn't done anything to drive more revenue. What I have to do is get another person to buy. And that could be a person from the additional traffic that I have, or it could just be another of these 22 visitors that I already have. I need to get a higher percentage of those visitors buying each day. So I'm going to put a 1 in there, and you see my revenue is now starting to climb. So now I'm educating those frontline workers about their individual impact on my financial objectives I'm trying to achieve. And if I'm commissioning those people in sales based on this revenue, they see an immediate payback from their efforts in growing more sales. So then if that's not the thing we want to work on, maybe we want to get them to buy more wine each time they buy. And I've just got an increase here of a small percentage that represents an additional bottle. So my standard was 4.62 bottles of wine, and I'm going to increase it to 5 bottles per customer who buys. And if I can do that, I'm driving an additional $42,000 in revenue. So this is the kind of thing that connects with my team in a way that changes the behavior that they're bringing to bear on the job I want them to do. So now I'm not just talking theory. Now that person can see in the course of a day, if they've been able to drive more bottles per person who buys than they were able to do the day before. They can see by 2 o'clock, on average, how many bottles are we selling per day to each person that buys. And we can track that all day. And then midday, if we're not hitting our target, we can really focus on what we need to do to get more bottles sold to our customers. So these are the kinds of things that you as leaders need to make available for your team so that they know what you want them to do, and they can modify behaviors before the profit and loss statement is generated at the end of the cycle. We want to correct things in the process of delivering the activities that produce the sales that we're trying to drive up. So this is just one example of the kind of tool that I think is critical to driving team engagement and making those hands work in support of the financial objectives that you're trying to achieve. Profit equation planner, I'm happy to mail you this sample, and you can take what we do for wineries and modify it to fit whatever the elements are of your business. And there's a similar tab for e-commerce scenarios, and in our industry, we do something called Wine Club that's very weird and unique for the wine industry, but there are models for that too, and I'd be happy to share that with you if you are interested. So those kinds of interactive team engagement discussions are what's going to bring you to ultimate success for your business and your winery, even if you aren't a winery, for whatever business you have. So this is what the completed grid might look like. This is a sample again from the Coup Rouge winery that we use in our training at my CPA firm, and you see their logo, Brotemarkle Davis and Company, in the heart of Napa Valley, St. Helena, California. And so we made a sample so people could understand what this grid process looks like. And so we identified across the 5 areas of the business: the financial, the customers, the operations, the people, and the end in mind. This is called the scope grid. That F is supposed to be a dollar sign. That's the financial side of the business. We evaluated what worked. We don't do the what worked thing very often. We are good at describing all the stuff that we don't do well down here, this middle row, where what we don't do well. We could write this thing in all day, especially us accounting types. We know the bad stuff, but we forget all the things that we did right. And so we need to fill that in and capture it. And then again, this ideal outcome, it's where the rubber hits the road. What do we want to see in this thing? And then we have the alignment to the why. And for our little old winery, we have our why is we believe in treating every visitor to our little old winery like kin. You might say Southern hospitality, like bacon fat, is in our blood because it is. So it's all about building an experience that makes people coming to the winery feel like family. And if we know that's our guiding force, then we go back to everything else that we do and go, well, if that's what we're going to do, the people decisions we make need to be to hire the best people. And then the operational stuff we did, we need to support processes that make it easy for people to buy from us. We need them to feel welcome and for the billing thing to not be a big pain. And we want more customers. We want to have more retail customers. We want to have national loyalty so that our customers feel like they're part of our family. We want to have better engagement with those customers. So you see how this why definition over there, as well as our end in mind, our objective, our exit strategy is to build a family legacy. So this is a long-term play that we're trying to work on here. And so that fills out all the other attributes that we worry about for doing this grid. So this is again called the scope grid, and that first F is a dollar sign for financial, and that's the S in scope. And it's a simple grid. You can do your own. You can draw on a piece of paper and do this, but it's about what we do right, where we need to improve some stuff, and what these ideal outcomes are across all of these areas of the business. And it's not just the financial column that we need to work on, it's all these other things that lead to the financial objectives that we're trying to create for our winery. So use that tool. There's a sample for you, and really change the way that you bring your teams together in achieving the business results that you want. So now we've got your hearts, your minds, and your hands, hopefully working in concert. We have your teams part of the solution, part of creating their own measures and goals, defining the what and how, and you define the why for them that helps them be in lockstep and working together to achieve the goals. It's important that you educate your teams, that you empower them, and ultimately that you trust them to make the right decisions, provided you've given them the right information so that they can do that the way that you would. And once that is all done, you have now put together a raft that will help guide you across the river and successfully reach the other side and be the great business that you are capable of being, no matter what goes on with the world around you. With that, I thank you for your time and attention. You can reach me at geni@evenanerd.com or at geni@bdcocpa.com. I look forward to hearing from you. I hope you have a great experience, and I thank you for your time and attention.